Well, good morning. Welcome. I hope everyone is having a fantastic Tableau conference. I hope that everyone is having some fun. Hope everyone is learning lots and you're getting a chance to meet fellow data enthusiasts and connect on all sorts of wonderful topics related to Tableau. Our session today obviously is building a custom Tableau portal in 60 minutes or less, no less. And your hosts this morning are going to be Wes Sheets. Wes is a senior system consultant with Tableau, and like myself, I'm Gordon Rose, also similarly titled. We work on the team that works with customers who are embedding Tableau. Exactly what we're here to talk about today. Today's talk is naturally part of the data and development track here at Tableau Conference. And if you walked into the room today thinking of Tableau as a really cool tool for building Vizzes and dashboards, which it certainly is, I think you'll leave today with a vision of Tableau as a platform for enterprise analytics. And the piece of the puzzle that we're going to focus on again today is embedding Tableau. Now, if this topic is so exciting that you want to come back and see it again, Wes and I will be back this afternoon to present, but at a minimum, please tell your coworkers, bring their neighbors, bring their pets. Come on in, we'll be talking more about embedding again this afternoon. It's a really, really exciting topic. And if you have not had the opportunity to binge watch enough great content in the area of data and development in the Tableau world, we still have 3 more sessions for you that you can attend tomorrow. 2 related to the not-so-secret exciting developer platform announcement that we have already made and that you can learn a lot more about tomorrow. And then if you happen to be in the retail space, we've got a great session for you about the same time tomorrow morning. So what do we mean by a custom Tableau portal? Let's take a look at a couple of examples to help us answer that question. If you're a citizen of the city of Boston, and you wanted to learn a little bit more about the trends as they related to the delivery of city services, if you wanted to glean other insights about what's going on in your beloved hometown, you would visit the city of Boston's portal, where Tableau Analytics are front and center, and they provide that valuable information to you. So certainly one aspect of a custom Tableau portal is where of course, they're Tableau Analytics, where analytics are tightly integrated into the portal. And here's what's important. They are central to the value that that website, that property, that portal delivers. They're core to the value of that particular site. Other people take it further. You could visit this web page to request a demo of a product built around Tableau Analytics. This is Decision Resources Group, where they service the global pharmaceutical market. They're one of hundreds of customers that Wes and I work with on a regular basis who build their business around custom Tableau portals. Again, Tableau seamlessly integrated into a web offering, the analytics central to the value that that web property has to offer. And then lastly, how about if we take a look at the example that we're going to focus on today? When Wes or myself, anyone joins the team that we're a part of, there's a little bit of a hazing kind of process that goes on. We ourselves have to build a custom Tableau portal. And, well, why would we do that? Naturally, to get to know the technology. But more than that, it's because embedding Tableau, embedding analytics is a surging trend. I mean, if self-service analytics, the cool dashboards, the Vizzes that we know Tableau for were a huge trend and certainly a continuing trend today, then perhaps where it's going and where it's growing fastest is in the area of embedding those analytics, taking analytics to the next level, making a much richer experience around them, enhancing the value of the analytics that you're creating in Tableau. That's why we need to build a portal so we know how to help you do the same. And I'm going to ask you to do something during today's session. As we go through the steps, the ABCs of building a portal, please think about how would this impact me? How could I do that? What is an existing portal in my organization that would benefit from embedded analytics? Is there a group that I could target with a custom Tableau portal? So you have a little bit of work to do today, and to get you excited about it, how about if just briefly I take us over to the portal that we're going to be working with actively today. And I need to, there's a little bit of work I need to do to learn how these things work. So that needs to slide over here. OK. This is the thing you don't learn building a custom Tableau portal, is what screen you need to move the web page over to. OK, so here we have a fictitious manufacturing company called Industrix. This is one I happen to build. And there are three main aspects to a custom Tableau portal. Typically, there's authentication when you authenticate to a portal. And for our purposes, what's relevant or especially important is that the authentication carries seamlessly over to Tableau in a single sign-on experience. That's going to be one of the key integration points we touch on. Another thing that these custom Tableau portals do is they interact with Tableau Server to learn what Vizzes are available to the authenticated user, and they create some sort of a dynamic UI for that user. That's going to be another key point of integration. We've got A and B out of the ABCs already. And the last thing, of course, we're going to do in a custom Tableau portal is we're going to embed the Viz. We're going to serve the analytics up to our end users. But we might choose to do more than that. We might significantly enhance how that Viz is cited in our portal and do some really cool things like take the JavaScript API, pull the data out of the Viz, and let the user download it. Maybe we take interactions that the user has with our Viz and we respond to them by being able to just simply clear them, say. Or we might want to expose editing the worksheet. Believe it or not, one of the most common use cases in embedded analytics is taking those analytics and letting the end users interact with them and even edit them all within the portal, and so on and so forth. We will be going much more deeply into the portal, naturally, as we build it out, but I want to get you, hopefully, a little bit excited about the cool things that you can do. So why would you build it? I think you've already got some strong ideas, but one of them would certainly be the ability to create a highly customized experience or target a specific group. Or maybe you've got data you've always kind of wanted to share to add value to your customers, or you have data that you want to monetize. Or you're looking to increase the adoption of analytics. And you do that by putting the analytics where people already go, to the portals they already visit. Or maybe you go a simpler route and even embed it in SharePoint or in Salesforce. Or you are one of our OEM customers, that's original equipment manufacturer, somebody who kind of white labels Tableau and then builds a complete offering around it. And all of this works seamlessly in the mobile experience, so it's really quite a compelling option. And because you're here, I assume you already have at least a strong interest in Tableau, but let's cover the bases. Why would you choose Tableau for this part of your analytics adventure at your organization? Well, one would be you don't need any more technology. If you have Tableau, you have everything you need to do everything you're going to see today. Also, the legendary ease of use of Tableau carries directly over. You'll find embedding to be an extremely easy thing to do. And again, if I can do it, and I had to do it, believe me, you can do it. And the result is you get to market faster with, as always, with Tableau, a superior result. So just briefly, what are we going to cover again today? The three main points of integration. How do you build a Tableau portal? Where do these things happen? We'll answer those questions, hopefully virtually entirely during the session, but of course we'll be open to more questions at the end. Those topics are going to be single sign-on, interacting with Tableau Server content, and embedding the Viz. And to get us started on that adventure, Wes is going to talk about design considerations, take us through SSO, interacting with Tableau Server content. Circle back at the end, we'll talk about embedding. Take it away, Wes. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon. So when you think about designing a portal, can you guys hear me? Is that better? Sorry about that. All right. So when you're thinking about designing a portal, and we use the term portal for this class, but Gordon gave a lot of good examples. People will put things into Salesforce, they'll put it into SharePoint, or they'll build their own web application. It's normally about tailoring the experience for the end users. You're not just sending URL links to say, hey, look at this report. You can actually add your navigation, add the experience that you want to really be able to cater to that end user. So when we're thinking about design considerations, the first thing you really want to do is think about the workflow, the experience that end user is going to have. In this example portal that we've given up here, it's a very basic example. So you have the first step, which is your login, the second step, which is really showing the visualizations that that user has access to. So you can build one set of code, and depending on who they are when they log in, they're going to see different Vizzes. So we'll pull that information from the back end of the server, and then we'll display a menu. And then the third part is really the viewing of the Viz itself and the interactivity, which is, Gordon showed a little bit about that as well. So when you think about that design consideration, you really want to think about the workflow. What steps are the users going to go through? In this course here, ours is simple. Log in, show them the Vizzes that they have access to, and then show them the Viz that they want to see after they've clicked on it. So 3 main steps. So the next consideration, you want to think about identifying content in your Tableau server. So some people will design it so that they put all the content that they want on this external portal in a specific project or in a specific site. And then when the user logs in, we're just looking to show any workbooks that that user has access to in that project or in that site. Another way that people do it is they tag workbooks. They'll add a tag that says something like external portal or sales portal. And then the scripts that will go through will only look for workbooks that have that tag. So you're going to use the REST API to pull that, but one of the most frequent ways to identify the content is using tags. So the next part, creating a dynamic menu. This is going to go where we're actually using the REST API. We hit the Tableau server and we say, give me all the workbooks that this user has access to. And then we'll also get an icon, which is going to show me that user's view of that Viz. And then we'll display a menu, which will easily guide people so they can select the Viz that they want to see. So the next one is integrating portal authentication with SSO. So there's a back end where you're connecting to the REST API and you're getting all the workbooks. You'll have to provide one username and password for that. But then the user, when they decide they want to see the visualization, they're actually having a login as well. So there's 2 separate layers there, and we'll go through SSO and some of the options in just a second. And then the next step is really thinking about embedding Tableau. So that's using our JavaScript API, putting it into the web page where you want it to, and then having 2-way interaction. So if somebody clicks an export button or if they click a mark, you can have the web page react based on how you would want to code it. And then the last part is go live. So the main point I want to hit on here is that our demonstration code that we're providing is very simple. We did it for just ease of use, easy for everybody to understand. And then if you're going to go production with this code, there's definitely a lot of layers that you need to add on there. So the next part we're going to jump into here, this thing's automatically moving, is we're going to go through the interacting with Tableau resources. So we discussed it. The first step is logging in. The second step is really showing people a menu of the visualizations. So we're going to go and hit the REST API. That's on sort of the back end of Tableau server, and we're going to pull all the meta information that these people have access to. So the first thing we're going to do is use this REST API, and just a couple bullet points on what the REST API can do. You can really do anything that you can do as an administrator when you log into Tableau server. So you could automate onboarding of users, add new users, add them to different sites, give them certain permissions. You can promote content. If you have certain users only have access to a development folder or project or a sandbox, and then they can specify, hey, this report's ready, and then you could actually have a REST API script that would move content from one folder to another, thus promoting it. You can also promote it to other servers if you have one department server and you want to push this to something else. So moving content and promoting content is a common use of the REST API. Managing permissions, you can manage any permissions on workbooks, data sources, projects. Anything that you could do through the UI, you can also do through the REST API. Creating sites and projects, same thing. If you wanted to create a site or a project, the REST API gives you an easy access to be able to handle that. And then creating a dynamic UI, that's what we're going to go through today. You're extracting information from Tableau server and then repopulating it on your portal to show the menu system. So now we're going to jump through the process that we actually take to create the dynamic menu of Vizzes. So we're going to go hit our REST API and grab a menu, or grab the content and then show the menu of results. So I'm going to move this. So for the example, and all this code is available up on GitHub after the project. So we've got all the example code that we actually built here. And we built it with, in Java, so we used Eclipse for the IDE. So anybody who's used Eclipse, you'll be familiar with our thing here. So let me pull out my bookmarks. OK, so the first place we're going to start here is, this is our analytics.jsp page. So this page in the portal is essentially the menu page, which is the one that brings up a list of all the Vizzes. So here we're doing two things. We're getting the list of Vizzes that they have access to, but we're also getting the thumbnail icon here. And this thumbnail icon is tailored to that user, so they're not going to see information that an administrator should see or somebody else. So from the REST API, we're going to go through, and the first thing we're going to do here in this analytics.jsp page is we're going to go to our manufacturing utilities library. In there, we have a load thumbnails function. And here, we're going to go to load thumbnails. So this is at the top of our manufacturing utils function, and it's taking a username and the session that we've already created. The first thing it's going to go do is it's going to use a helper library. So we use a library from a group called the Data Painters, and they've built it in Java, and it reduces the REST API functions to just making a function call rather than building up the XML request, having to send it to Tableau server in a certain way, and then getting it back and parsing all the results. So what could be hundreds of lines of code to interface directly with the REST API, these helper libraries that are available on the web make it a lot simpler. So here, we've started out, we've instantiated a tab REST function, or handle, and we called it tab1, and we're going to use that down here to go through our different steps. So the first thing that we're going to do is, from that same helper libraries, we're calling get workbooks by user, and we're going to pass it the username. So it's just the string-based username. This is who I want the workbooks for. It's going to go ahead and make the calls against the REST API to first get the user, to get their information, and then pull back all the workbooks. And so the helper library is going to conveniently put that into a string array for us here of workbooks. So at that point, we've got the raw information about the workbooks, and we'll go through for each workbook in that list and start getting our information. First thing we do is we break down the results, and we get an ID, as well as the context path and a context name. The difference being in the URL, so if you have a workbook name that has spaces in it, the context name is not going to have that. It would be actually what you see in the URL. So we'll use this information on the next step when we actually send it to have the user view the visualization, and we need that information for that. So the next step we're going to do is, since we've got the actual workbook information, we want the information about the individual views from that workbook. So from there, we get the workbook views, and we pass it the workbook ID, and we're getting back an array of views that we're going to iterate through here. So for each individual view, we're going to do this next bit of logic where we split it down. And the main thing that we want from this is the get workbook view icon. This is what we're going to use as our thumbnail on the menu system. So we pass it the workbook ID and the view ID, and it gives us back an icon. Since we want to take that icon and basically save it to the file system so that it makes it easy to pass out. You can call them directly, but this is kind of a caching mechanism, so it saves them there, and you can do things that accelerate it. One of the things you want to make sure you don't do is have every request that you make in your portal layer always hit the Tableau server, because then it's going to be just tremendous traffic from both sides. So this is an excellent opportunity to be able to cache things. You could do something here where you check the date and make sure that it hasn't been refreshed. But the basic of what we're doing here is opening up a file and saving out to the file system that icon that we just got. And we're doing it, we're putting it in a specific folder. We're using the viewid.png so that later on we can pull up and we know exactly what we've got. So the last part here on the bottom of this function is we're just packing all the information back down into another array, and we're going to pass back this Tableau views array. And at the last part here, we set it as a session. So for ease of use for our demonstration, we just set it as a session variable. Obviously, you'd want to put another storage mechanism or a caching layer where you'd store this information and only hit the Tableau server, maybe only when they log in or something else. Here, we've stuffed it into the session manager for ease of use. So now that we're done with that function, we come back here. We know that our load thumbnails, we now have a session variable that has all of our all the workbooks and visualizations that we have access to. So if we go down further in the JSP file in this analytics, here's where we're actually going to build the menu. So we're going to say for each Tableau view, we're going to iterate through, and we'll put the thumbnail, which is our view ID, call that graphic, and we'll wrap it with a link to the workbook. And here we'll just pass that context name and the view name to this embedding.jsp page. And the embedding.jsp is the actual view page that will show you the visualization. So here, we've basically created the menu that's in this process here. So that's a basic demo of going through creating the viz from using the REST API, pulling the meta information that we need from there. So the next thing I want to talk about is the single sign-on process. So the process that we went through there hits the REST API. You will need a administrator, site administrator, or a server administrator that has access to view all the different users' information. You can also pass through the REST API and just log in as that user, but you may not be able to get all the other information that you need. On the front side, now that we've built the menu and the end user is using the portal, when they click on that link and say, this is the visualization I want to see, and we go to the embedded page, we're going to actually show the visualization, and that requires a second sign-on. So single sign-on from the front end is usually handled in a couple different ways. Trusted authentication is a way of programmatically calling a URL, getting a token back, and then using that token to open up the session for the end user. In order for a server to be able to do that, a portal layer to be able to do that, you have to add the IP address to a whitelist in Tableau Server. So it's a whitelist-based authentication method, but it is, in our experience, it's the most common one that we see in the field. A lot of people, depending on whatever their technology is on the front side, if they're integrating with Salesforce or something else, they'll use a different version or a different technique called SAML. And so SAML's good if you already have the SAML system, the IDP set up and configured. If you're integrating with a system like Salesforce where they're using SAML, it makes it very simple because the SSO is handled automatically from Tableau Server to Salesforce, and the portal layer should also be able to understand what SAML is. So SAML, it's typically used when we're seeing other third-party systems that are being mashed up or an embedding happening into something like a Salesforce. And the last one is Active Directory. So Microsoft has a single sign-on, and it works great if everybody lives in the Active Directory domain. But in many instances, when you're building a portal or if you're dealing with external users, they're not part of your AD domain, or you don't intend to put them in your AD domain. So while it's good for internal, we don't see it a lot with portal integrations. So we're going to take a look at trusted authentication. SAML is kind of a whole other topic on itself, but we're going to take a look at trusted authentication today and figure out, take a look at the code and see how we did it for this one as well. So trusted authentication, it allows you to have your single sign-on. It allows you to leverage your own authentication. So whatever your portal layer authenticates that user as, you're able to break it down to just that user and then make a call through a web service to Tableau Server, and you get back the token that would allow access to it. So really, it doesn't matter what your other authentication method is. You're just interfacing with it at that point and moving forward. So there's two flavors. We have restricted and unrestricted, and that just basically means whether or not the user has access to the Tableau Server UI. So if you wanted to just force them to only see the embedded visualization but never have the ability to jump out and see the whole toolbar, then you would use the restricted ticket. And unrestricted would allow them to have access to anything. So once the session is created, they could essentially open up another tab in their browser and go to the Tableau Server interface and see everything. So for this one, we're using a general restricted ticket because we only want them to see the visualizations that we provided and not see the Tableau server interface. So for this demo, I'm going to jump back over to the IDE. And not this one. And so we're going to go back and start in the embedding.jsp page. So this is embedding is going to be the page where we're actually showing the visualization in the page. And so the first thing we're going to do here is use this utils function again to get a trusted ticket. And a trusted ticket's just going to be a string of characters that we're going to use and put into the URL that tells Tableau server to accept this user. So inside of our utils function here, our library, we have this getTrustedTicket function. So this is not using a helper library, so we've left this one open so you can see the difference between calling a single function like getTicket versus writing a raw interface to the REST API on Tableau server. So here we actually are going through using an HTTP URL connection, and then we're doing a post, and we're building up this URL with all of our variables, which is the server, the username, and the target site that we're going to use. And then from there, we're posting that data. We're adding headers, specific headers of what type of content this is, what the length is, and then we set these other variables, and we get back, we're using the buffered readers to get back basically an input line. And all it's going to be is just going to be a string of characters. There's no XML wrapping it. There's no parsing of JSON. So we just take that line, and we were going to append that and send it back here as our response from the string. So at the end of this URL, we're going to have a string that is a trusted ticket. And then immediately down here, we're going to construct our URL for the visualization. And all we're doing is adding this little part here, which is trusted /trusted / the actual ticket name, and sending that to Tableau server. So the handshake here, when in the previous function, we've called Tableau server and said, I want this user to be able to log in. And Tableau server checks its whitelist and says, hey, I have you. You're a trusted web server. So it sends back that ticket, and then that ticket is embedded into the URL, and so the user would have to go hit it. There's a timeout period that happens there, so and you can control that through tab admin. So you can control like whether or not somebody has access to be able to actually sniff that ticket and then use it. So security vulnerabilities are very, very minor here, and you can build all that additional logic into your application layer. So that's a basic example of going through trusted tickets, using trusted tickets to get authenticated to the Tableau server. And at this point, the user is going to be back on this page where they've actually landed and they're viewing the visualization. So a trusted ticket just happened in the background there, and we land up here on this page to view the visualization as expected. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Gordon, have him take care of the rest of this.
Okay, thank you, Wes. That's awesome. Hey, just a side note, Wes is being a little bit modest here. That helper library, Data Painters, Wes is Data Painters. That's his site. And so and that really is a key point of I think of Wes's sharing around the REST API. And by the way, I should just stop and check, is everyone comfortable with the term REST API? We're really just talking about a very straightforward, simple way of communicating over HTTP to an endpoint, sending it a request and getting some information back. It's an API. And as Wes said, the REST API for Tableau server lets you do virtually anything that you can if you're logged in, as though you were logged in to Tableau server. But, as Wes also pointed out, if you've worked with a REST API, you know that often there are a series of steps that you go through to achieve your end goal. And our end goal here was to get workbooks, views, thumbnails, write them to disk, present the menu, and we saved ourselves literally hundreds of lines of code just by using that helper library. And by the way, it's not limited to Java. Wes has a C# library, and then a colleague of ours, Brian Howe, many of you may know him, he's Tableau and Behold, that awesome blog fame. He has an excellent library written in Python, and then Tableau itself is starting to develop one known as the server client library, and that is going to mature and grow and be available via GitHub. So there are lots of resources available to you to really ease the, let me make sure that I'm on. To really ease, is that better? Yeah, okay. To really ease the burden of just simply interacting with the REST API. And of course, that's not specific to Tableau, it's just the nature of a REST API. There tends to be a lot of XML parsing and round trips, and we can make that a lot easier for you. Okay, so what have we seen so far? We saw that when we logged onto the site, we went to just one additional page, the analytics.jsp. Wes took us through a relatively small routine that fetched the thumbnails and created the menu for us. That wasn't too tough. We also saw that when the user clicked on one of those images, that we went to the embedding page, so just a second additional page. And through trusted tickets, we took the logon that had been successful at the portal level and turned it into a successful logon to Tableau server, so that we didn't have the user log in a second time, there were no additional calls, seamless SSO. Those are two of the three key integration points. And hopefully you have the sense that, geez, it really wasn't that difficult to put that in place. Now, I do want to say that we are using Java. Obviously, we had to pick a language to write in, but you don't have to use Java. Because it is a REST API, it's language agnostic. It could be PHP, it could be Python, it could be C#, it could be something else. So please do know that regardless of your web server of choice and your web development language of choice, you can do exactly what we're doing here. So I just wanted to plug Wes's efforts there around Data Painter. Certainly made my life easier writing the portal. And let's continue now and talk about the actual embedding. Now we're ready to present the viz to the user, and we're going to, as a result of that, migrate to the third key technical point in today's session, and that is the JavaScript API. So why use the JavaScript API? Well, it's what we use to get that seamless integration. When we saw the embedding, we didn't really point it out, but if you looked at the page closely, you wouldn't see the word Tableau anywhere. And if you didn't know, you probably would have to guess at what would be the cool technology behind that visualization. It's the JavaScript API that lets us seamlessly make the viz a part of our portal. And it gives us, and this is key, it gives us bidirectional communication with the Tableau viz. And what we mean by that is one direction is clearly we can control the behavior of the viz. That means we demonstrated getting data. We can control the viz, we can tell it to give it the data that lies behind it so that we can turn around and present it to the end user for download. We can open up the PDF export dialog box. We can clear selections that a user has made. We can actually change filter values. We can change parameter values. In fact, just like the REST API lets us do virtually anything that we can do through the server UI, the JavaScript API lets us do virtually anything a user would do interactively with a viz. So it's very, very powerful. But the communication also goes in the other direction. And that is that when a user interacts with the viz, they click on a mark, they change a filter value, they change the value of a parameter, we can be notified of that. We can assign event listeners in our JavaScript code that lets us track what the user is doing. That opens up a world of possibilities. As the user is interacting with the viz and making selections, we might be off doing other things in the portal UI to respond to that. We might do very advanced things like let a user select a mark, open up a dialog box, and let the user edit the value, write it back to the database, and refresh the viz. We can use the JavaScript for that writeback use case that I've been asked for maybe 500 times by Tableau customers. The sky is really the limit once you have the Tableau JavaScript API in your hands and you have embedded a Tableau viz. We kind of talk through these examples. So you can control the viz behavior. User clicks on the portal, somewhere in the portal UI, your JavaScript code kicks in, you interact with the viz, you tell it to do something, you've enriched the experience the user is having with that embedded visualization. And likewise, as the user interacts with the viz, you can be responding. You can detect those interactions and choose to do something. And it's trivial. it turns out that, well, really, we could embed, oops, actually, I don't think I'm going to be able, I wanted to highlight that for you. That one bolded line there at the very bottom is all we need to embed a visualization. So you saw a routine to get the thumbnails. We saw a somewhat lengthy routine to get the trusted ticket, but that was because we wanted to show you the amount of time that the library saves you so you don't have to write that kind of a routine. And now we're looking at a single line of code to embed the viz. So it's really not that tough. Just 3 points of integration. Now, you might choose, as we did here, to expand it a little bit for readability. And when you embed a viz, the first thing you have is a whole bunch of options at your disposal. So you control whether the tabs appear in a multi-tab published workbook. You control whether the Tableau toolbar appears. And usually that's turned off because we want the look to be seamless. We don't want evidence of Tableau necessarily in the custom portal. And here's a really, really cool feature. When the Tableau viz has rendered and is ready for the first user interaction, you get an event that you can trap. That's called onFirstInteractive. And that lets you go out and do all sorts of other things. So the Tableau viz is loaded, you get notified, you get to do cool things with your portal in response to that event. And with a little bit of a trick that Brian Howell, that I mentioned just a second ago, taught folks through his Tableau and Behold blog, you can use the JavaScript API to seamlessly integrate web editing. And we saw that in the initial demo as well. So there are lots of cool things you can do with the Tableau JavaScript API. So let's go back to Eclipse, and let's walk through some of those examples. And there we go. Okie doke. And I'm just going to scroll these. I'm going to find the mouse. Thanks, Wes. Obviously, a little bit audio and visual challenged here this morning. So I want to scroll back up here to where we've got a few bookmarks. And then also, while we're here, and we're back in Eclipse, Wes has already shared, obviously, this is a popular Java, well, much more than Java now, but kind of its roots are in Java. Eclipse is a very popular Java IDE. You don't have to have Eclipse to benefit from the source code we'll be sharing. And again, you don't really even have to know Java because you can kind of read it the way you might read any foreign language if you knew some of the verbs and the general structure of it. You can get through it and understand what's going on and translate it into your mind into PHP, C#, whatever your language of choice is. But we do supply the Eclipse project. That source code will be downloadable for you. And the bookmarks that you see here are called out in a little README. So we will take you step by step through everything we're looking at today. And that'll be an opportunity for you to study this in more detail. Because obviously, we don't want to walk you through the code line by line. And we don't have enough time to do it in 60 minutes. But we do want you to see kind of where things go, what's the general structure, what does the work effort look like, and then how am I going to put this in place when I build my own custom Tableau portal? That's really kind of the mission of today's session. So let's take a look at that last key piece, that third integration point, and that is, of course, embedding the viz. Well, the first thing to point out is that when you embed a viz, you do it by just simply putting a div somewhere on your HTML page. A div is just a block element in HTML. It's a way of organizing and positioning your content. So you simply put a div where you want the viz to be, and you give that div an ID. That's not too bad. So there's our div. That's the location in our HTML page where the viz will render. And then, now that we have that viz set up, we're going to do just a small handful of things. They're going to loosely follow this basic recipe that we have here at the top. And at the top of each of the 3 sections in the code that you'll have available to you, there's a basic recipe that outlines the key steps. So again, even if the Java were completely gibberish, you would be able to just look at the steps and understand what needed to happen to accomplish what you saw today in the session. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, there we go. In JavaScript, we're going to create a little variable there that represents the div that we want, where we want the viz to render. And you will see in the code, and I'll point out here by way of a tip, you want to use traditional JavaScript and HTML DOM to get this variable. Many of us who work with HTML also use jQuery, great way to navigate a page and write compact code that does all sorts of cool things. But I will pass along one small tip. When you're getting the Viz variable in your JavaScript code, use traditional HTML and DOM and JavaScript, not jQuery. For whatever reason, for how the events fire, it winds up giving you an unpredictable location for the Viz, whereas traditional JavaScript works perfectly. So we'll recommend when you go home and do this on your own, use this approach for creating that variable before you embed the Viz. Now, the next thing, and we've seen this on the slide, we want to assign a few options. Typically, you'll want to hide the tabs so that each Viz appears by itself solely in wherever you're embedding it. And you're also probably going to want to hide the toolbars because you want it to be your portal, not your portal plus Tableau. Although you're naturally welcome to advertise that you're using Tableau Analytics. And then lastly, this is an extremely handy vehicle for you. That's that onFirst interactive event that tells you the Viz is loaded, it's ready for user interaction. Is there anything else you'd like to do before the user dives in and starts working with your analytic? And let's take a look at what we do, some best practices and things I recommend that you do in that onFirst interactive event. So it's clearly we're recommending that you do include an event handler for it when you instantiate your Viz. You could, of course, put the function right there in line. We call out a separate function for readability. We'll take a look at that in just a second. Lastly, there's that single line of code, the only one that we ever need have written to get the Viz loaded and presented to the user. And that Viz variable now represents the embedded Viz. So that, by the way, you're certainly going to want to make a page level variable. I recommend that you create a second page level variable to represent the workbook. The Viz and the workbook are not quite the same thing. So you want an object to represent the Viz, and you want an object to represent the workbook. Both of those should be page level. And where do you suspect we're going to initialize them? Well, we already know about the Viz because we just defined that or initialized it by rendering the Viz. Well, how about if in the onFirst interactive function, which we told our code should be this little routine right here, that's probably a good place to initialize the workbook variable because we know the Viz has completed loading, and we can initialize our workbook variable successfully at this point. And we will turn around and reuse that workbook variable in other routines as we start to manipulate the Viz and do hopefully some cool things in our portal where that Viz is embedded. You may, and then what we happen to do here in the complete load, our response to the fact that the Viz is ready, we go on to do a couple of things, and that is modify the UI of our portal. This is a great time to look at the Viz and say, are there any adjustments I should make to the UI based on on the Viz that we've loaded? This is a nice example for you. I think what we do is we create buttons. If we detect that the workbook is one of multiple tabs, then we can put buttons in our UI that allow the user to navigate through those tabs. And we discover those workbooks dynamically because we have the JavaScript API. We can do it in real time so that it works no matter what Viz the user selects. So that's essentially what's going on here, and that's an example, a piece of the code you might want to explore a little bit more on your own. It will hopefully stimulate some ideas for what you might choose to do when you embed your Viz. So this code here, and obviously as I promised, we're not going to go through every single line of code, but essentially what we're doing is we're building up those buttons, and I'll demonstrate that in a second. And then lastly, we said that communication is two ways. So here is where we have the ability to add an event listener. That also would typically take place in the onFirst interactive, where you would say, okay, I want to know if a user clicks on a mark, I want to know if a user changes a filter value, et cetera. You would define that there, and that, of course, there will be an event handler. So you'll define that. For each event handler in the JavaScript API, you'll get a lot of cool information about the event passed to you. You can process it, take appropriate action in your UI. And then just to give you a little bit of a look to wrap up this section before we go back and demonstrate these things for you again, are other examples. Here is a little bit of code tied to a clear selections button. So user makes a bunch of selections. They want to return the viz to its pristine state before they started clicking around. You can put a button on your UI that lets them do that in a single click. You might want to show the PDF export dialog box. And by the way, notice that some things operate on the viz object and other things operate at the sheet level or that we, of course, would get from the workbook. So those, again, are your two key variables you're kind of working with over and over again when you embed Tableau. And then lastly, just to show you what's here, not to spend a whole lot of time on it, we do demonstrate in this sample code for you how to use the getData API. That's an extremely powerful one, and it does let you go to the viz and say, give me either the underlying data, meaning the data that was built from, or the summary data, that's the marks that you see, the aggregated or summarized data. Pull it into a local object. You can cycle through it, make it available for download, feed it to another application. You have full fluidity with the data that lies behind the viz. And those are going to be the key things that are in the demo for you. Let's just go back. The one thing that I think can be particularly useful to work with, I want to show you kind of a cool use case to wrap up the demo, and then we're going to open up for questions. Is that probably good timing-wise? So we're going to go back to the self-service analytics menu. We're going to open up another viz. Now, this particular use case we did not put in the code because the database that everyone would have for our writeback example would vary. So there's kind of no way to have a, but I want to show you the level of things that you can do with the JavaScript API. How many people would like to have a writeback use case with Tableau who have ever been asked for it? I definitely see, wow, yeah, just a few hands. OK, so let's take a look at editing order data. We see a mark here where it looks like somewhere around a little over 4K is our number. Well, we're going to open up a little UI here. This pick list was built using the JavaScript API. We just cycled through, and we asked the worksheet for the data, just as we described a second ago. And we have the values, yeah, 5,000, a little over 5,000. Let's make that 20,000. Now, when we click Submit here, let's just kind of set the stage. We use the JavaScript API to go get data. We built a little bit of an HTML UI out of it. We let the user interact with it. When we click Submit, we're going to turn around and use more JavaScript. We're going to make a call to our web server, which is going to take the new value that the user specified. They're going to update the database in real time. We're going to click Submit. Whoa, and our viz updated instantly through a writeback use case. Wow, so we circled back at the end, and we used the JavaScript API to refresh the viz. Seamless, transparent. You didn't even see a page round turn. How can we do that? Well, courtesy of the Tableau JavaScript API. All of these things are at your disposal as you seek to build a custom Tableau portal. 3 key points of integration: single sign-on, interact with the server to get a menu, embed the viz. It can be as simple as you want, or it can be as feature-rich as you want. At this point, we'd kind of like to just pause and share with you a little bit more information about where you can get some of these fantastic resources. And it turns out that there will be a GitHub site as well as a Dropbox folder for you. You will have all of the resources that Wes and I have worked on for this session available to you, as well as a lot of other really fantastic content. I'll leave that up. And by the way, these slides will be there too, so you can review them if you so choose. I see people kind of capturing that, so let me leave that up there. And there is a survey. We invite you to share what you liked, what you didn't like, what was great, what could be improved. Just please take the time. Share with us your thoughts, and we certainly hope this has been a valuable and interesting session for you. I'd like to open it up for questions. Yes?
On the Analytics tab, you're showing the icon for the view.
Yes?
We have the workbook, and there could be multiple tabs. Can we just show the first tab in the workbook? You have all the...
Yes, when we went through and actually iterated through the items to show each view,
Yeah, maybe
You
I
can
should
take
say-
the very first one.
Yeah, the question is, can we, when we, on the analysis page where we show the thumbnails, let's say we have a workbook with multiple ones. Remember that loop where we loop through every single one? Just stop at the first one. The answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, question? Yeah.
Slide.
Yeah.
It sounds like a detailed question that we might want to chat a little bit offline. Maybe
Yeah,
just
it's very common. Usually the best way is a hybrid approach where you're still using Active Directory to power a lot of users, but you're using local auth on the Tableau server side, and which requires some synchronization and other things. So there's a couple techniques to do it, but we could talk afterwards. I can give you details. You can. You're basically saying that. Yeah, you have to script it, and there's some tools out there that'll help you sync your AD domains, but you can't use some of the features that are nice about the AD syncing and automatic stuff, but you can make it happen. The microphone back
Yeah,
there.
it's
thank
live.
you, Wes. There is a mic there. Yeah.
So my question is there a resource for those of us who want to do a portal from within Tableau in the Tableau server environment?
So the Tableau server itself is more like a file server. It's not a portal application. So you can put visualizations, and I see people get very creative where they build a Viz, a dashboard that is a menu, and it just kind of scrolls one after another and links to other things using action filters.
Yeah,
so that's possible. The problem usually becomes the overhead. You're having to do hacks. You're going and making a workbook that's got a data source of some type to be able to make this menu work. And in the past, it's usually people will do that to begin with, and then they go to more of an HTML kind of portal integration. The announcement that the developers made, though, about the dashboard or desktop extensions, that's going to be a phenomenal improvement, because then we can build all these things. You don't need a web server. You'll be able to publish that stuff to your Tableau server, even an HTML custom menu, and it will be a part of the Viz. So that's kind of the direction that Tableau is going as a platform, but I have seen people do what you're saying.
And Wes, by the way, came over from professional services, where he would be out in the field helping some very recognizable household names build their own custom Tableau portals. So please do, we'll be around afterwards, too, to answer
Absolutely.
questions. Yeah.
Yep. That's
Can you
exactly
use
what
the
you would use
REST
it for.
API to create, yeah, I'm just repeating the question, to create users on the Tableau server?
Yep. You would have to specify it. So you create the user, you can add the user to a group, and then you can add permissions, set permissions for the users on different objects. A great thing, in the demo, we do have a code. I wrote a REST API library to set up this demo content on your Tableau server, and it's called a portal installer.
Yeah.
But you run it, it's in Java, and it goes through and actually creates a site, adds users, all the demo content, it publishes the workbooks, it does everything for you. And so you can actually look at that code, and it tells you exactly how to do exactly what you're talking about. So it's code that you would have to write, who Tom is and what access does he have, and you can script it out. Or you could build that even further into a web application where you could have your own custom interface, but it's going to use the same REST API to make those functions happen. So the example script, so it's this code, but it tells you how to do it. And if you open it up, it'll actually run through and show you how to use the REST API. In there, we just called it installer. It's like installer.zip. And so it'll all be in there. And it's got a README file that tells you exactly what to do. Yeah. Sure.
How about the gentleman behind the mic? If you have a question, it would be helpful just to, where the other folks are standing there behind the mic, just so that everyone can hear your question. That would be great. And did you have one?
Yeah, so what types of special considerations do you have for online users, if any?
So for Tableau Online?
Yeah, so for Tableau Online versus, on-prem server, cloud server.
Yeah, the online has slight limitations due to the fact that you're basically a site, and so at most you can have a site admin privilege. So depending on, well, Tableau Online's the most up-to-date version, but the newer versions you can do a lot more. There was a situation for a while where site admins through the REST API weren't able to do things like updating a user information and stuff of that nature. So there really wasn't a way to programmatically do it, but they have improved it. So the main things that you can't be a site or server admin through online, and there's some limitations around that. So that's about it, though. Everything else you can do and have a lot of fun with.
Yeah.
So like most of the portal stuff that we saw today, like with the RESTful stuff, bringing that for the end user is still sort of the same thing. It's just more of that administrative side.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a level of permissions. It's a step down with online.
Just one tiny comment about that is you may have noticed that there are a couple different URL formats you can use and if you are going against Tableau Online, you must use the /t and not the /site. That is one little caveat in connection with that. But yep.
We did see that.
You did see that, okay.
It's usually the first thing you learn, so.
Yeah, you find it out the hard way or the easy way, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Sure.
yeah.
I have a question about the search on the page that you showed. So that does anything, like it works, it search on the portal?
On the portal page, on the part of the menu?
Yeah.
I don't know
Oh,
if that was actually functional in here. Did you tie into anything?
there's nothing tied into the search there, although you obviously, you could.
Right.
So if I
yeah.
want to search on the portal, what is your recommendation? What do you use?
So for this demo, we stuffed everything into the session variable. So if you're doing a search, I would break open that session variable and go through the workbooks to see if there's a pattern match of some type.
Like the workbook title or something?
Workbook title, yeah, basically. There's not a lot of information that you can get about the workbook, so it's mostly in the title. Or if you wanted to break down by project, so you can add a lot more to it. You would know specifically, like this portal has 5 different projects, and the menu might break it up by project. So you could have it search contextually for the project name and the workbook name or the view name.
But we can't use the existing Tableau server search engine to...
Not the Solar search, but you can, the REST API calls now take filtering as an option, so.
Yes, so you can send filter queries through the REST API, but again, just thinking of something in a scalability sense, you don't want to design the portal to always have to reach over to hit the Tableau server. You want to get all that information in one pull, and the really advantage of the portal is that you're reducing the number of hits that you have to the Tableau server, except for just viewing those visualizations. So I would recommend highly staying away from like if I do a search, it's going to reach out to Tableau server because you're not really offloading any of that work at that point.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, you could search tags. You could pull the tags across as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, that's great, yeah.
Mine is probably a dumb question. If you have multiple Viz on a worksheet and you are only embedding some of those Viz into your portal, the interaction you made inside Tableau, would you have to replicate into your JavaScript API, or would they be seamless?
So it's a tricky situation. So right now, there is something that's being fixed where if you build a listener and you have an action filter that takes you to another page, the listener will not fire. So it will not, the order of events happens that the action filter fires before the listener gets triggered. So right now, yes, if you want to go to the JavaScript API, you would have to rebuild that functionality. Probably around the 10.5 version, that's going to be fixed. So then you'll be able to actually allow your users to do action filters that won't override your JavaScript. So if you're just doing a basic embedding, they can do action filters. But the combination of action filters and the JavaScript listeners doesn't work really synchronously right now.
So you said it's working in the newer versions?
It is. It was something that's been brought up by a number of customers, and so they've identified it and said they're fixing it. I can't tell you specifically when it'll be released, but it's right around the corner. They're aware of it.
Okay,
Yep.
one last thing. Do you
Sure.
have helper functions in PHP?
halfway written. PHP is my favorite language to use to just rapidly prototype something. But I've always built things based on customer demand. So C# was the first one, and then Java and Python came right behind it. But yes, I would say in the next month or so, we will have a PHP version just because I need it.
So where do we check it on the same GitHub?
Yeah, if you keep following here, there's also a website called datapainters.com where we throw a bunch of just libraries and stuff that we've accumulated. But all of this will be available through GitHub/Tableau.
Okay, what the site you said? Data
Painters.
Data Painters.
Yeah,
Okay.
.com. So they have a bunch of different stuff on there as well.
All right. Thanks a lot.
They being Wes. Yeah, so you see, these are the REST API connectors. There's other good assets there too.
Yeah, we just try to dump anything that we've made over the years for customers and stuff that was useful. Next question.
Yeah, my experience is with embedding on-prem with just already named licensed users. Could you touch briefly on the licensing restrictions if we were to do that as an external-facing embed?
So from a licensing perspective, it basically takes the common licensing perspective as if they were users going into Tableau Server. So a big no-no would be don't buy 5 licenses and then use 1 user to go through the REST API to power 10,000 users coming through your portal. Other than that, it's pretty simple. So what's that?
Right.
So because of the fact that they're going to come through SSO probably, like a SAML from Salesforce, then you're going to have an authentication problem on the front end anyways, because they're both going to, it gets back to the authentication problem, like some are in your local AD and some are in IDP somewhere else that are external. You'd have to be creative how to handle it. I know from a licensing perspective, licensing team looks at it from it's a no-no to have, portal user that's opened up. But it's damaging because the only other way to actually filter per user, so if that is company X and they're coming in, you would have to send a parameter to Tableau saying this is company X. And that's insecure because I can just open up the Salesforce page, view the source and see what that ID is, and I could change it to somebody else and open up that thing. The only way to securely do it is know that this user who's been authenticated through SAML is this person because they've already passed my IDP test on the front end. So it's a security issue, but it's also a licensing issue. So
I have a question about using trusted.
sure.
Trust. Is that by domain or by URL? When you're making that whitelist?
Mm-hmm. The whitelist is by IP address. So if your server, your web server, wherever it's making that call from, it would have to be that IP address. If it's a cluster of web servers and they're possibly making calls from different IP addresses, you'd have to put each one in that cluster. To Tableau server, it's saying, when it gets a request, it's saying who's requesting this and what's the IP address, and then it's checking that whitelist. Yeah.
And it just so happens that the link to that exact topic is in the code as part of the recipe, so it'll describe the steps you need to do that.
It goes into
Yeah.
depth there.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Sure. Yes and no. So most of the stuff in there works great all the way back to probably 9.1. There is I touched on it a little bit earlier, there's a permissions thing where they've enhanced newer versions to allow a site administrator to create users and modify users. On older systems, it didn't allow you to do that. So the way I wrote the script was it first goes in and creates the site, then creates the site administrator, and then it logs in as that site administrator to create the other accounts on the demo site. So on older versions, that part will fail, and it'll just tell you, it couldn't create a user, didn't have permission, I'm stopping. But in those areas, if you commented out those 3 users, it would work on everything else. I've tested it all the way back to 10.1, but yeah. 10-1, okay, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. You can, just to elaborate on that a little bit, we, in this particular example, we're not necessarily using a Tableau JavaScript API to write back, but we're using Ajax, which is another popular web standard to make a call from the web page without refreshing it to make the experience seamless. And then, of course, it's whatever logic you would implement on the other side of that Ajax call on the server to talk to the database and then send back whether or not it had been successful. Yes.
Yep.
And there is a blog on that
Tableau's
just
a
recently
reader.
published on Brian Howells. He's of Tableau and Behold fame on that exact use case, goes through all the steps. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we need to. So thank you very much. Thanks, Epi. And enjoy the rest of the conference.